Chris, how's it going, man? Thanks for being here. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How about yourself, man?
I'm doing excellent. Doing
Thank you for the
excellent.
invitation. Thank
Of
you for the
course.
opportunity.
Thanks for accepting it. Super excited, to be honest. And I've known you for four, 4 or 5, maybe 6 years now.
Maybe 6 years. I
I
think
think
it's
so.
2018, maybe
Yeah. So
it's
2, 4,
16, 17.
17. I think 17,
Yeah.
because I had a conversation with you about fitness before I ever thought about selling cars. I don't know if you remember that. Like you were in your like mafia pinstripe suit when I asked you.
Gotcha.
But so obviously you're the COO of Hubert Investor Auto Group, and you've been in the auto industry for a while now. But let's go back in time. How did you even get started in the auto industry?
So my father bought, he was a silent partner in a dealership when I was 17. So my first job was working in that dealership in the detail department, washing cars. And then the next summer, prior to going to college, I spent one of my jobs. So I worked at the veterinarian's office from 5 to like 8 in the morning, cleaning dog cages and stuff. And then I would leave that job and go work at the dealership to sell cars. So, at 18, that's a pretty lucrative job for an 18-year-old kid. And I hated every second of it. I mean, it was the one thing I was like, I'm never going to be in this space. I'm never going to be in cars.
Wow.
I never want to do this because it was greasy. It was nasty. It didn't feel good. I hated the way the customers got treated. I hated the conversations that happened after the customers left. Like I just didn't like it. And so went to college. Engineering was what I was going to study. So I got into NC State to study engineering, and very quickly decided that I didn't want to sit behind a desk and play with numbers all day.
Yeah.
And which is kind of funny because now I sit behind a desk and play with numbers all day.
Right.
Kind of sort of. But different set of numbers, right? There's people behind the numbers. That's what I recognized. And so decided to switch majors and go after a business degree. Really kind of pushed into that major because I wanted to study art, and my dad's like, that's not a chance that's going to happen. If you want to do that, fine, but not on my dollar. Which I kind of get it. I get his concern with that. Oddly enough, that's what my daughter studied, and he was all about her studying it. So, but anyway, that's a different subject. But started studying business, and through that, really began to study entrepreneurship and what it meant to build a business. And that's what appealed to me. So I began to understand the automotive space was more than just the automotive space. It was a business. There's people in it. And by the time I made that shift, he had purchased a second dealership, and he was not the silent partner in that one. He was the active dealer principal and managing it, running it. And so then after a year of me studying business, he and the partner in the first dealership decided to swap stock. So he became 100% owner in that dealership and gave up his percentage in the one that I despised the culture there. But yeah, it was about building business. Like that's where everything's really shifted. We had a business plan competition at NC State, and they chose 5 business plans out of all the business majors that were seniors. And I was one of the 5. It's kind of neat because we were actually in the process of buying a second dealership at the time. And it was a Mazda dealership in Shelby, North Carolina. And so my business plan was that business. So it let me really dive into how the numbers played together, what it meant, projections, market study, the whole idea of the business development of it. And it was neat. This was way before Shark Tank. So I think I graduated in 95. So this was 1994, fall semester of 94. And, but we actually got to present business plans to investors, bankers, private equity people. Wow. I knew I had no chance going in because I was asking for $2.1 million, and everybody else's business plan was less than 150 grand.
Okay.
If they're going to take a chance on somebody, it's not going to be a 21-year-old kid who's chasing 2.1.
Right.
But it gave me a lot of experience in just what it meant to build the business. So, and it completely shifted my thinking about the space, because I knew if in the development of the business, I didn't have the role of running the dealership, but I knew eventually that would be what I would want to do. And if I could do that, then I could make an impact on the space. I mean, I know that sounds weird, but like I wanted people to be treated different. I wanted
For
to know
sure.
when it came to us, it was different. Again, this was a long, long time ago in 1995. But I have kind of had that vision ever since then.
So how did you go from that to what you currently do now in your position and as COO?
A long, slow walk with lots of stumbles in between. So my first position in management in the dealership was doing business management as an F&I manager. Probably my least favorite position because I had worked in parts and service through college, which I really enjoyed that. That was a challenge, but I enjoyed the challenge. Had worked in sales, but went from business manager to used car sales manager. And from that to new car manager. And then we opened up a little bitty small used car dealership. And that was kind of the first opportunity I got to run a space just by myself. I had 4 salespeople. We kept about 50 cars in inventory. It wasn't big. But so his belief is you need to understand what you're doing slowly. Like it's a slow walk rather than just position by name. It's position by experience. So did that for a year, or almost 2 years actually. Came back to be the used car manager again, but now with 3 rooftops. So it's a bigger space. We had acquired some more franchises. And then in 2004, we were building the new Honda store that we're in this location now. We moved there in January of 2005. And they positioned me there as the general manager of that store. And I did that for 9 years. I was the general manager of the Honda store for 9 years. We had, 35 to 45 employees over that time. But again, we had purchased, rooftop after rooftop there, and I moved them all kind of to one central location. And then in 2014, got moved into the COO position. And that's evolved because really, most people, we don't even, that's on my business card, COO, and that's kind of what people know me as. But it's 2017, we started doing strategic planning, and the title of visionary was bestowed to me. They hit me with the sword, like knighted me with this title of visionary. And that's been since 2017.
Who do you serve?
Multiple facets. So I serve in a lot of capacities. I do serve our people. I feel my job is at work is to serve our people. It's as the visionary. If I don't understand the market and see things ahead of time and plan for them and figure out like how are we going to hit that, like people think was kind of dreamy, but you put this vision in place and every single day you take a step towards that. But if it's the wrong vision, man, there's 200 families that depend on that vision being correct. So I serve those. We have 200 employees total between full-time and part-time. I serve them directly is how I see it. And we have an accountability chart, and the way an accountability chart's drawn is you've got this one person at the top and somebody answers to them and several people answer to that person. And then it just kind of flows down. I think it's drawn upside down. I think really the weight of where we're headed is on my shoulders, that whole atlas holding the world up. Now, I don't think it's because of my own abilities. That's how I see it. So I think first I would say serving for sure our people, serving my family. I serve at church. And this has evolved over my life, but I think I've gotten to the space where I think everywhere I show up, I try to be a servant. I think it's what drives me.
For those people that maybe they've been in the auto industry for a while and in their head, they have this idea of wanting to open a used car lot, for instance, because I'm friends with a few people and on Facebook, and they've actually done that. What advice would you give someone that is either just started or at least has that idea in their head with all the experience and everything that you have?
You and I had a conversation about 5 years ago, and it actually turned into a debate. It was about starting with why. Remember that?
I sure do.
But I think that's where you start. it's what is it about the car space that appeals to you? Is it the service of the people? Is it because, Dad and I are both in the space, he's still, my father owns the dealerships and he's still actively involved. I mean, it feels like a passing of the baton that's happening, right? But we got in it for completely different reasons. And his reasoning is he loves the pressing of the flesh, the shaking of the hand, the eyeball to eyeball, the interaction. Like he loves that. I do too. He likes it with the customers, which I'm not saying I don't like it with the customers, but I enjoy it with the employee base. Like I say all the time, if they describe our dealership as a leadership development company disguised as a car dealership, that would be the ultimate compliment. So what is it about the car space or opening up a dealership that you're trying to accomplish? Like, what is it about the business that drives you? What's the why behind it? If it's just because, hey, if I sell a bunch of cars, I'll make a bunch of money, don't do it. Because at that point, you're going to be completely subservient to the meta factors of the universe. And when I say that, it's about, you're going to be the economy of scale of how things are working in the world is going to affect your business. One of the ways to make it a little more recession proof, nothing's recession proof completely except maybe toilet paper sales. But one of the ways to make it more recession proof is like you're serving a bigger purpose, which means everybody in the organization understands that and they align with that purpose and they want to participate. But if you just start out chasing the dollar, it's going to be real hard to get people that are not just chasing the dollar to align with that. That includes your customer. I mean, customers that chase dollars are chasing discount. They're not chasing the experience, not chasing the interaction. They're not chasing the relationship. So when the economy goes south, they're going to retreat and pull back. But if you've got an employee base and a customer base that understands there's more to what you're doing than just selling them a car, it's creating a relationship and being their person, being their car person. In our situation, I would love to create leaders. Everybody in the organization can be a leader wherever they show up, either at work, at home, church, in the community, just becoming a leader. Well, if they start showing up that way, then people are going to want to do business with them differently. They're going to understand that it's a relationship. They're going to understand that, hey, there's more to this than the transaction of buying a car. So I love the car space now because I feel like I'm affecting the car space now.
Yeah.
I said in the beginning, I hated it. Like it was greasy. I don't feel like we're greasy. I mean, I think we can't control 100% of the transactions or 100% of the employees, but I think that the majority of employees understand that we serve a better purpose. I mean, the fact that they participated in the backpack drive recently, I was overwhelmed by the participation by the employees of wanting to give to that purpose because they knew, hey, right now it's tough. We're not selling as many cars because we don't have as many to sell because of inventory issues. But hey, we can help the dealership achieve this goal and align with that purpose. I think that's a prime example of we've got guys that understand it. So the question is, what would you say to get started? Why are you doing it? Because when it gets hard, you're going to remember why you did it.
I think that is effective in business and also in life in general. I've definitely experienced that, especially after having a little girl, and changed everything.
I would be willing to bet if we go back and have that conversation we had 5 years ago, that your answer is different now.
Oh, for sure.
Because the baby's here.
Yep.
Everything changes. So true.
It definitely does, man.
And you're a good dad, dude. I love the way you show up as a dad.
Well, I appreciate that for sure. Now, given all your success, what is the biggest challenge that you face now?
Solving the inventory problem. I mean, that's the immediate thing. And then with, like I said, transition of leadership. We've got a great leadership team now, probably the best leadership team we've ever had. They all align. Most of them are new in that position, so they're learning on the job, which is awesome because that means they fail a lot. But the great thing is when they fail, we find an answer. I know that sounds crazy, but success is found in the failures. And I think right now our immediate thing is, okay, well, how do we keep enough inventory to make sure that everybody has the ability to earn a living? How do we keep enough inventory that we have the ability to serve the customer well? Like it's inventory driven. Take Toyota, for example, right? We sold 97 new Toyotas in April. Over the next 60 days, we've got 62 available to us that are coming. 32 of those are pre-sold. That's a challenge.
Yeah.
But we know that there's still a need of transportation, right? There are people still needing to buy vehicles, and we're just trying to serve them well with used inventory. Like, we need to be able to carry the inventory that people want and need. So yeah, that's probably the most immediate thing. The second thing I would say behind that would be sticking to the vision. Now, I've written a vision script. So what it's called is, what does it look like looking at January 1st, 2027? What does 2026 look like? And I've written that out of what I want it to look like. And then the challenge is, every single day, are we taking a step towards that? Overcoming the challenges of the minute, knowing that, hey, we've got 4 years of vision and we've got to go after. Like, it's got to be that constant walk towards that. That would be the biggest thing.
In life, and could also be in business, but what are some of the biggest adversities that you faced, and what did you learn through them?
Oh, wow. So in 2000, my wife and I purchased a gym. That was probably the biggest challenge and the largest, well, let me say that, one of the largest financial failure I've ever had. I'll phrase it that way. I've had a lot of failures, but financially, that was a big bust. And bought it from a friend. Piece of advice: don't buy any business from a friend. But it was my fault. I did not do the due diligence behind what was really there. And so we had 4 years of real adversity through that. I mean, every penny I was making in the car dealership was going to keep the gym alive. So it was really, really tight financially. And during that time, we had my first kid. I was diagnosed with testicular cancer in 1998. And 2 years to the day that I found my own tumor, we discovered we were pregnant, which was 6 months after we bought the gym. So now we have this, and we had decided, hey, we don't know if we can have kids, so we're not going to try not to.
Yeah.
So if God puts him in our life, he's got a plan. So we're just going to say, hey, if it happens, it happens. Could not have happened at a more inopportune time, but God's got a sense of humor, because I look back and think, okay, it was 2 years to the day, which we did recognize in the moment. We recognize that. But I think that's the way God goes, hey, I got you. Just chill out.
Sure.
But again, it was a big financial struggle. Newborn, raising her at the gym. My mom would keep her a couple of days a week, but the rest of the time she was with us. But that made her who she is. She was ridiculously grown up. I teased somebody, I said she was 40 going on 30. I mean, she was 4 years old going on 30. Like, she was super mature. But that lesson of that business failure taught me a lot. Like I said, don't do business with a friend. Regardless of who you do business with, do your due diligence. Force the due diligence, because I was asking the questions. I just was not getting the answers. And the answers I was getting, I was trusting because of the relationship. Don't do that. I'm not saying don't trust people, but get the numbers, get the real numbers. But it also, I'm never going to be in the gym space again. That I learned that lesson, but I also learned, that regardless of how hard it is, there is a way to make it through. Suzanne and I made it through that. And we look back at that decision to purchase that and think about how many bad things happened in the moment they were bad because of that gym. Like, there was a lot of bad decisions that came out of that purchase that could have destroyed us as a family and a marriage. But we stuck through it. We leaned on our faith. We leaned on one another and went through a lot. But it was a big, big challenge and a big failure.
Wow. Yeah, that's a perfect storm coming all together at the same time.
Yeah, you're right, man. It was nasty.
What now, being around you, because I've worked for you probably a total of a year and a half ish altogether, and your passion's extremely obvious, but what do you like most about what you do?
Being able to have the opportunity to expose people to thought processes they've never had before. You're involved in my leadership development. And one of my favorite things about that is when we go into those meetings, when we have them on a regular basis, because it's been a challenge lately, right?
Yeah.
Even the one-on-ones, right? And seeing in those conversations a light bulb go off in somebody's head because it's something they've never thought of before. which changes the trajectory of their thought process. It's a spark of a moment of like, wow, okay, well, what about like, and because I'm a big reader, constantly looking for new ways, new ideas, and new thought processes. It's just exciting to be able to take something that I've learned, because I'm constantly looking for something new, putting it in somebody else's life, because God has a way of doing that too, right?
Hmm.
I say all the time, like it's just being a conduit to information. I spend a lot of time studying business, but I spend a lot of time studying my faith, and a lot of times those line up really, really well. And knowing that eventually there's going to be a position where I'm going to be put in a situation to share that knowledge in a way that's going to change somebody's thought process and future. The only way to change the future is to change your thoughts.
Yeah.
So that really charges me up. It's one of the most favorite things I do, is like sitting down, coaching people in those 4 areas to begin with, and seeing them develop, and then hearing the stories,
Yeah.
hearing the successes that come out of it, not disclosing names or anything, but hearing somebody go who was trying to develop a new relationship with their brother because their mother had passed and they had become estranged, and they lived within 15 minutes of one another, and him saying, hey, I want the relationship I had with my brother before my mom passed. And 4 weeks in, him coming into that meeting emotional, saying, I've got the best relationship with my brother I've ever had, because of the intentionality that was placed, that came from the leadership development.
Yeah.
So it's been, and that's just one story, but I can name a bunch of just big success stories. And the cool thing about it is, in that meeting, we don't talk about business a lot.
Right. Yeah.
We talk about, it's calibration, which is mental and spiritual. We talk about condition, which is how you show up physically. We talk about contribution, which is how do you show up in the workspace or your community. And we talk about your connection, a relationship. We really don't dive into business a whole lot, but if you go back and look at the productivity of the people that have been through that program, those 12 to 24 weeks that are in it, their productivity always goes up. It's just as a side effect, which just, to me, is just validation of, hey, if people become better leaders of themselves, they become more productive, which that's how we affect the business. We affect it by helping the people become better leaders of themselves. They learn personal accountability in a much different way.
If you had to start over,
Mm-hmm.
what would you do differently?
Man, I started doing personal development work about, I'd say 8 to 10 years ago. Like intentionally, I can tell you it was 8 years ago. So in 2014, the intimidation factor of being the leader of the organization, that was an overwhelming moment, knowing that at this point, there's families that depend on, all the families depend on my work. So I just started looking at that. How do I become a better leader? How does that work? How does that look? So I got really intentional about it in 14. Because personal development doesn't happen on purpose. It doesn't happen by accident. It's on purpose. It's just not, you're not going to wake up every morning being a better development of who you were yesterday. That doesn't happen. It's got to be intentional. And then studying people that are masters of that craft, like that. John Maxwell and his books and his leadership have been a massive influence on me. David Stewart wrote a book called Leadership by the Good Book. That's a big book for me. So just studying people that were masters of that, personally developing themselves, even people that at this point I have weeded out of my life, but they were there for a season because they were super accelerated in that area, big influencers that I could watch and say, if I study what they do, I can develop myself, so they were in my life for a season, and then there would be something that misaligned us, whether it's just whatever reason. So I would kind of pull away from that, but never stop moving forward and personally developing. I would have started that right. I mean, probably in high school. I mean, that's kind of what try to give my children, one of the things that John Maxwell, John Maxwell, I think is 77 this year. Give you perspective on when he was growing up as a teenager. So that means, 50s, in the 50s as a teenager. And he went to his dad and was talking about an allowance. And his dad goes, look, you just need to understand the chores you do around the home, that's the rent that's due to live here, But here's what I will do. I'll give you books to read. And if you read the book and you write me a report, I'll pay you the cover price of the book. That'll be an allowance for you.
Wow.
So I adopted that idea because I think it's brilliant, because by the time John Maxwell had graduated high school, he had read 80 personal development books and understood things on a much different level. His dad did that for all three of his kids, John and his sister and his brother. So John Maxwell leads the largest personal leadership development company on the planet. Like, he is number one in his space. His sister graduated from college in 1974, I believe, and she was a millionaire as a female graduating college already. And his brother is the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. Well, so if you've got three siblings that went through that same process that all end up being hyper successful in their space, there's got to be something to the fact that they learned to think different really early. So when I heard that story, that's what I started doing with my kids. Like, it's difficult to find leadership development for children. That's probably a space. Maybe I need to write that down. So that's probably a space that needs a lot, is getting kids to understand how to be better leaders of themselves. But I would have started it then, because it would have given me 35 years a head start of where I ended up,
Yeah.
Because I think at that point I would have, at every stage of my position in the dealership space, I would have shown up differently, because I would have been a different person. Like, I would have led better, way better. I would have started that journey earlier.
Andy Frisella, speaking of children's books, wrote a series of 8 or 9.
Milo and Otis, man, they're
Yep.
great. They're great books for kids.
Really?
Jocko Willemick has some too.
Okay.
He's got several, and the Andy books are aimed at really young kids, meaning they're like cartoons, because it's all about his bulldogs. They're good. Like, there's good lessons in those books. Jocko's, his is about a kid who has an uncle that's a Navy SEAL, and his development of self-worth and confidence. He has a young children's book as well. I think it's about a dragon. I'm trying to remember the name of it. But Jocko's, I think he's written another one, but it's a series of 3, and they're aimed at kids that are starting to read books, like that 3rd, 4th grade kid. And they're good lessons, man. They're real, and it's about a little boy, but I mean, Shelby, who's a massive reader, she's read probably 3 times as many books as I have, and she's 13. She got into she enjoyed them. She enjoyed the characters. Like, it had nothing to do with it was a little boy or a little girl.
Yeah.
Like, she understood the lessons and got a lot out of it. But yeah, I would recommend, if you're going to start really early, cartoon kids, then it's like the Milo and Otis from Andy,
For sure.
But at the next level, man, Jocko's books are really, they're seriously good books.
What is the best advice you've ever been given?
We just started doing some branding content, and I got asked this question actually this past week, and I've done a lot of rethinking about my answer. But my grandfather was on my mama's side, was actually a pretty big mentor for my dad in business and life. And one of the pieces of advice that my grandfather gave my dad, which he passed down to me, is that a man can do a whole lot of things, but he can only, woman, but a person can do many things, but only one thing really, really well. And I think it's a superpower personally, but a little bit of ADD, not a little bit, a lot of ADD. So I bounce around and chase shiny objects a lot.
Yeah.
So trying to abide by that advice about doing the one thing, so getting intensely focused and being, hey, how do we do this one thing well? But it's led me to think about guys that run multiple businesses, right? So it may be a business in a bunch of different spaces, And they obviously perform really, really well if they have tons of success. And you look at it on the big picture and you say, well, what's their one thing? You know, but
Yeah.
maybe it's just how they build the businesses, because they're probably finding leadership for all those different spaces who does one thing well, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if they can find the right leadership that does one thing well, then they can go on and build the next business, because maybe the thing they do really well is build a business or lead a team or create leaders or whatever that one thing is. So trying to find that one thing, which we talked about the why, finding your why. And I think that helps you um, develop the one thing, is finding the why,
Mm.
right? So that, and then if that why is your one thing, then okay, well, how do you apply it to whatever space you want to get into? I think it's important um, to understand that.
Earlier, when you were talking about the business, you were talking about the core values of the business, and
Right.
knowing you personally, I know you have a set I am statement that's really your core value as a person and how you present yourself. And I know that's really played a big part in how you run the business as a person, and then also how you live your life. And so, what was the process like for you developing that? And also, what advice would you give for somebody else, that why they should do it, and then how they can go about doing it for themselves?
That's a great question. When when you're going through that process, I think one of the first things you should do is look at how other people show up that bothers you. Because we are really quick to point out where other people's shortcomings are. But if we'll realize, and this is something I've been coached on recently, that how other people show up that makes us uneasy or uncomfortable or aggravates us, let's say. What aggravates us is that we have that. So if someone shows up incongruently or out of character, or out of having character, or out of integrity, then the reason that bothers us is because we know that sometimes that happens for us, and it's that we're projecting that shortcoming onto them.
Mm.
So I would say make a list of all the things that aggravate you about how people show up, and then recognize that really it's a mirror. Like when you're writing that list, think about all the ways that you display those how you see them as negative characteristics, and then write down the flip side of it, right?
Mm.
So if you see someone acting out, like for me, I'm a bold man who acts with integrity and from love, standing as a beacon pointing to God's grace and mercy. And I came up with those because I don't like it when people show up out of integrity, because when I show up out of integrity, that's where the biggest damage to my life has been done. It's harmed my character or whatever. So it's right. So if I want to overcome that, then I got to be focused on that on a daily, with every decision. Like,
Yeah.
is it with integrity, and does it come from a place of love? Because when I've acted in a way that was not loving, it didn't work out well for me, right?
Yeah.
And I know it's hard if you've been around me for any amount of time to think, well, Chris always is the guy who's bold in the room, right? Because I'll come in a room like a bull in a china shop. But there's a lot of situations where I do become a wallflower, right? And you can't make impact in a positive way by being that. So it's constantly reminding myself, be bold, right?
Yeah.
So, and then combining those together, being bold, acting with integrity, and from love. Like and then does it violate you know, am I a beacon pointing to God's grace and mercy? Because one of the hardest things is character. I think probably another piece of advice I'd say is, my dad says, it takes forever to build character and one bad decision to tear it down. And I know that the people that have known me for years can point to places in my life where my character was violated. Like I did not act with good character. So in a way to rebuild that is, okay, well, this is the statement I'm going to live by. Because over time, your character gets rebuilt, because they can say, hey, I know him from 20 years ago, and I saw him act really stupid. Like it's like incongruent with who he's saying he is. I would agree. Right.
Yeah.
But if I consistently act in the manner in which I say who I am now, then over time, the forgiveness comes, like the grace comes, the mercy comes of, well, yep, he was stupid. There was a time in his life that he didn't live by that statement of who he says he is now or who he's trying to grow into be. And over time, the character comes back. There's always going to be wrinkles because people are going to point to it. But what I'd say to those people that are pointing out the wrinkles, part of the reason it aggravates you is because it's probably a piece of who you are. That's how we judge others based on their actions, and we judge ourselves based on our intentions. Like, because we know our intentions. So it's real easy for us to excuse away bad behavior because we know of our intentions, but it's real easy for us to slap somebody down based on their activities because we don't know their intentions.
Wow.
And so it's just a constant. But yeah, I'd start there. Like, what is it that aggravates you about other people? And then say, okay, well, how do I show up in that way? And what's the opposite of that? So if it's, I don't like it when people show up, one way at church, another way at the bar, one way at home, right? They're living incongruent. The root word of integrity is integer, meaning whole, one, right? So the idea of living in integrity means everywhere you show up, you're the same person. There's only one you. I ask people that when I'm coaching them, how many yous are there? Because once you get to a point where there's just one you, life changes.
Yeah.
But if you don't like it when people show up incongruently, right, out of alignment, without integrity, then recognize that's probably something you're guilty of, right? So just look at the things that irritate you. What's the other side of it? And then make that part of your statement. Try to choose probably 2 or 3. I'd try not to go over 3. We have 5 core values. We don't want to go over those, but
right.
If you can find those 3 things and then say, okay, this is who I am, because it is an I am statement. I am a bold man, right? Even though right now I may not be that completely, it's who you're working to be every day. And when I was coming up with that, the group that I was in, maybe it sounds a little cultish, but you would make the statement. You would open up your introduction to people with your I am proclamation statement, and they would in unison answer, yes, you are, right?
Yeah.
So it's a congruency of everybody that's surrounding you. The tribe that's around you says that's who you are. One of the best things you could probably do is get a tribe around you who understands who you're trying to become. And when they see you out of balance with that, will call you out in that moment.
Is there anything that you want to share that I didn't think to ask?
I created some content 2018 to 2022 that was called Answers from the Stairs. And basically it was done as a way to get people to understand who I was as the leader of the company, so that either as a consumer or as a possible employee, they may see it and connect with it. I got pushed on by multiple people to turn that into a book.
Wow.
I go to a leadership development day with a coaching program that I was working with, and talked about how to turn that podcast content into a book. And while I'm there, a friend of mine, Steve Weatherford, he said he endorsed the idea of turning that into a book. And then he said, so I think it's great content, but you know what I want to know? I want to know how you've been married 25 years, raised 3 God-fearing daughters who have amazing personalities and show up great, and run a business, because I see you do life with your kids. I see you do life in the business. I see you do life in the gym, but I don't see how you do life with your wife. I think you should do a podcast with your wife. And she and I had talked about it before, but podcast requires a ton of transparency. And there's things that, you may or may not want to have a conversation about on the podcast. And Steve said, well, don't talk about that on episode 1.
Right. Yeah.
And so it kind of evolved. It started out being this idea of just be her and I. And then it evolved into, what if we interviewed super successful couples that lean on their faith, right? That their faith is the center of their marriage, that had been married for a while, have business success, have family success. Like, what does it look like to interview them and let them tell their story? Because as they tell their story, we get to tell ours. So it's evolved, but that's how it got started. So we do have it's called Faith Family Fulfillment. The neat thing about it is the company that's helping us create that content and that produce that podcast is turning the set of interviews into a book. So that we have a book that's coming. It's actually going to drop on our anniversary. The projected and hoped for drop date is September the 14th, which is our 26th anniversary, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, for real.
But it's a collection of the transcripts of the interview, which I'm excited about because I think not everybody's going to see the content electronically. So if they can actually hold it and read it and make notes and start having conversations with their spouse, after reading it. It's always been one of the hopes for us is the podcast creates conversation. We've had several people reach out to us and send us direct messages, which is where the majority of the conversations happen because nobody wants to have the conversation in the open.
Yeah.
Sending direct messages saying, hey, we use that on date night. We use it as content that we listen to on the way to and from date night. But it helps them create conversation over date night on the way to and from. It's like we'll ask a question and they'll pause, and at least that's how it's been explained to us, which is really our biggest hope and prayer is that it creates conversation, because as people have conversations, like it can always lead to, it's opening up mindsets, it's just being exposed to an idea that you've never heard before.
Absolutely.
And we've been surprised. I was actually just looking back over some of the episodes and seeing what our top downloaded stuff was, because that gives us a hint of where we need to go. We had a podcast with two dear, I'll say friends of ours that are pastors down in Alabama. And it was two pastors talking about sex inside of marriage. I knew that one would be a big downloaded episode.
Right. Of course.
But on the listening content side of it, our number one episode is actually another pastor and his wife. He lost his wife to breast cancer and she lost her husband, and they found each other after that. And it's the view of a widow and a widower getting together with a blended family. All of her children are adopted. She had 2 adopted children from her first marriage. And so she's adopted all of his children. And there's 6 total now. Right? So coming together in that season of grief, and it's called Grief is for a Season. Grief is for a Season. It's not a life sentence. And that's been the number one most listened to episode, which tells you a lot about the world right now.
Yeah.
That we're in a season of grief, even more important than how to have good sex. That's a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
If you look at it from the macro level.
For sure.
And another friend of ours and his wife came on, Chad Wright and his wife, Brooke. And he's a Navy SEAL, super deep in his faith and very vocal. I love his personality. He runs ultra marathons. He's a beast in his own right. But theirs is the most watched on our YouTube channel. Our YouTube channel, really, we've only been around 26 episodes, so it's not like we had this huge following, right?
Right.
But they've had their episode's been watched 3,400 times, which is a big number for us.
Wow.
But I think it's because her story resonated, because while he was in Iraq, stationed in Iraq as a SEAL, she was struggling with drug addiction at home. He came home to a wife who was addicted to opioids. And she's very open about that struggle. And so I think that their story resonates. So the more people that we can get on there that tell those kind of stories, the more people go, oh, so I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
So it's been a blessing for us, because it's not something we're trying to monetize. It's not about the money. It's about the story, And I always pray us in. And for me, it's show us how God can get the glory in the story, because that's what it's about.
Absolutely.
So I'm not a minister. She's not a minister, but I think it's a ministry.
Yeah.
So, but it's been pretty cool. Yeah. Faith, family, fulfillment.
That's awesome, man. Go check it out, everybody. It's I have it downloaded. I've listened to the episodes, and it's a lot of good stuff, especially as a newly married, year and a half in, but even still.
Yeah, we were asked who the ideal audience member was for that. And I was like, well, if you're thinking about getting married, or you're freshly married, or you've been married for a little while, or you've been married for a while. So kind of everybody.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Right. So
For sure. Where can our listeners and viewers go to learn about you, learn about the company, and then also remind everybody about the podcast and where they can find that at?
yeah, so our website for the company is hv.auto. And I'd say if you've like, it's car space, right? And I said, my ultimate goal is to create a leadership development company disguised as a car dealership. I can teach skill sets. We can teach people how to sell a car. We can send them to school to become a mechanic. Like, we can teach them the accounting side of things. What I can't teach is the core values and understanding our purpose. So if you hear our core values and you hear our purpose statement and it resonates, right? We want to enrich every life we touch by providing an incredible dealership experience, by having people who have a passion to serve, promote positivity, encourage teamwork, adapt for growth, and they're relentless in their duties. If that resonates, then consider the car space. Give us an opportunity to help you be a better leader. hv.auto, not .com, but HVHubertVester.auto. That website has all of our inventory on it if you happen to want to buy a car. But if you want to fill out an application, we're always looking for good team members. Like, we're crazy busy right now, man. It's a weird time in the auto space, but I think it's a time that we can grow our company in the right direction and serve our customers well if we can get the right people on board. But yeah, it's like there's career tabs and places to apply for employment. So company-wise, hv.auto. Personal is HV Auto COO on Instagram, Twitter. Christopher Vester on Facebook. I'm there too. I don't do Twitter a lot because it feels weird. I'm waiting for Elon to get rid of the bots.
Right.
So that's legitimate. So it'd be interesting to see what comes out when they sue him, trying to make him, like, I think that's why I did it. That's a whole nother subject, but yeah. So Twitter and Instagram. The podcast I am repurposing my content that I did from 18 to 22 or 21 as a podcast, as a quick podcast. They're quick, 4, 5, 6 minutes. Answers from the Stairs is that podcast, and then my wife and I's Faith Family Fulfillment, and they're on Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasting, Pocket Podcast. Anywhere you find your podcast, you can find them there. And it's on YouTube. So my YouTube channel, my Faith Family Fulfillment YouTube channel, they're there. And like I said, that episode with Chad Wright, man, it's super effective, and it's wild because we have a small audience, but obviously people are sharing it and it's showing up and sending it out to people. Drugs, Grace, I think was the name of Drugs and Grace, and Mercy. I'm trying to remember the name of theirs, but it was good. It was really good. But yeah, YouTube, anywhere you find podcasts.
Chris, thanks again for being on here, man. I really appreciate you accepting the invitation. I know you're super busy, and I know that a lot of people get a lot out of it today when they listen to this. So thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.